Hey guys, tonight we're taking a quiet little stroll back to the Middle Ages, though calling it quiet might be generous. It's a world of clanging bells, the smell of tallow candles, and the persistent sound of someone sharpening something ominous in a corner. Tonight, we're not peasants or nobles or wandering monks, we're something far less comfortable. Tonight, you are an assassin, or at least the medieval version of one. Now, I know what you're picturing. A sleek hooded figure, silent and graceful, leaping across rooftops while violins play in slow motion. Yeah, no, reality was much muddier, literally. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And drop a comment telling me where you're listening from and what time it is there. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You start in a nameless medieval town, the kind that doesn't make it onto maps because, frankly, it doesn't deserve to. The air smells like wet straw, smoke, and that indescribable blend of livestock plus human hope that defines every early morning in the 13th century. You're maybe 12, maybe 14. No one's really sure, least of all you. Birth certificates aren't exactly a thing. You've been living hand to mouth, mostly sweeping tavern floors and avoiding eye contact with anyone carrying a sword. That's when he finds you. A man who looks like someone carved his face out of leather and forgot to sand the edges. He's sitting at the back of a tavern, sipping something dark from a chipped cup. He watches you too long, then crooks a finger. You hesitate, of course, because in this century, no good story starts with a stranger beckons from the shadows. But your curiosity is louder than your survival instinct. It often is, especially when you haven't eaten properly in days. He asks if you're quick. Not smart, not strong, quick. You nod because that seems like the right answer. He tosses a coin that lands with a satisfying clink. 1 meal's worth of metal, glinting like a tiny miracle. Ever want to learn something useful? He asks, his eyes narrowing, testing you. That's how it begins. You're taken to what might generously be called a safe house, though it's really a converted stable with drafty walls and the faint smell of regret. There are others, half-starved kids, older ones missing fingers, all of them looking at you like you're fresh competition. You learn quickly that the Brotherhood isn't some romantic secret society. It's more like a very shady gig economy. Dangerous work, no benefits, and constant risk of falling off a roof. Your first lesson is simple: disappear. Not literally, of course, magics for the monks and the myths. This is about blending in, moving like you belong wherever you are. The man, your so-called mentor, demonstrates by melting into a crowd of merchants so naturally that you lose sight of him within seconds. You try to do the same, but your attempt ends with someone yelling, "Hey, thief!" and chasing you down the street with a broom. Training, you realize, is mostly trial by embarrassment. At night, lying on a straw mat that crunches every time you breathe, you stare at the ceiling and wonder what exactly you've agreed to. Outside, you hear the soft clatter of hooves, a distant prayer bell, and somewhere, faint singing from a tavern. There's comfort in that, the sound of life continuing around you, even if yours feels paused. The next morning, you're given a task: shadow a merchant through the marketplace. You think it sounds exciting. It's not. It's mostly dodging cabbages, chickens, and the occasional suspicious glance. You're supposed to practice staying unseen, but the merchant keeps turning around at the worst possible moments, and you end up pretending to browse dried fish, which incidentally smells like betrayal and despair. A historical fact here: in some medieval cities, especially in the Islamic world during the time of the Hashishin, a real sect often blamed or praised for inventing the concept of the assassin, recruits underwent years of indoctrination and skill building before they were trusted with any actual missions. You, however, are in Europe, where training is more figure it out or die trying. There's no uniform, no hidden blade, no fancy creed. Just you, a worn cloak, and a vague sense that you've made a terrible career choice. Days blur together in a rhythm of running, hiding, failing, trying again. You learn how to walk silently, how to pick a lock with a bent nail, how to climb a crumbling wall without losing your shoes. Your hands grow calloused, your stomach slightly less empty. You start noticing the way people move, the way a liar avoids eye contact, or how a guard's hand always drifts toward his sword hilt when he's nervous. It's like learning a new language, one made entirely of gestures. One night, you ask your mentor why anyone becomes an assassin. He grunts, which you've learned is his version of philosophy. Then, after a long silence, he says, "Because someone has to." You think about that as you stare into the dark. Someone has to. Someone has to remove the problems that others can't fix. Someone has to slip between the cracks of society and make sure certain people simply stop existing. It sounds noble in theory, but the reality is less so. The reality smells like old leather and blood you can't wash off your hands no matter how hard you try. Still, you stay. Because what else is there? A lesser-known detail. Real medieval assassins were often used as political tools, dispatched not by shadowy brotherhoods but by nobles who didn't want to get their hands dirty. Many were never remembered by name. They simply vanished, sometimes because they succeeded and sometimes because they didn't. You wonder which kind you'll be. As days stretch into weeks, you start to feel the edges of your old life fade. The orphan, the tavern kid, the nobody, they're still there, somewhere beneath the surface. But now there's something else layered on top. Awareness, caution, purpose, maybe even power. And yet, lying awake one night beneath a dripping roof, you can't help but ask yourself a dangerous question. The same one historians still debate. Did any of these so-called assassins truly believe in what they were doing? Or were they just surviving one day at a time? You suspect it's the latter. Outside, the wind shifts, carrying the scent of rain and the faint toll of a midnight bell. Somewhere far off, a rooster mistakes the hour and crows too early. You smile to yourself in the dark, your first genuine smile in months, and whisper, "Not yet. Tomorrow your Real training begins." Morning creeps into the world like a half-hearted apology. A dull gray light filters through the cracks in the stable wall, carrying with it the smell of damp hay and last night's smoke. You're stiff, hungry, and slightly resentful that the Middle Ages didn't think to invent mattresses yet. Across the room, your mentor is already awake, whittling a piece of wood into something sharp because, apparently, that's how he meditates. You pull yourself upright, brush the straw from your hair, and try to look alive. He tosses the carved stick at you. It's a training dagger, though it feels more like a poorly balanced spoon. "Let's see if you can manage not to stab yourself today," he says. His humor, like everything else about him, is mostly terrifying. Training, you soon learn, is not the glamorous montage you might have hoped for. There's no sweeping music, no instant mastery. Just pain, repetition, and mud. Endless, glorious mud. You run until your lungs feel like bellows at a blacksmith's forge. You climb crumbling stone walls that crumble slightly more every time you touch them. You crawl through alleyways that smell like someone mixed rotten onions with wet fur. You practice disappearing into crowds, which is tricky, considering you're covered in the aforementioned mud and smell like it too. The first few days, you fail spectacularly. A guard spots you during a blend-in exercise and chases you halfway across town, yelling something about thieving gutter rats. You spend the rest of the afternoon hiding inside a barrel of salted fish. You do not recommend it, but over time, slowly, painfully, you start to improve. You learn how to move without thinking, to let your body find balance on uneven stones. You realize that silence isn't about holding your breath, it's about syncing with the rhythm of the world around you. The clatter of hooves, the murmur of voices, the way the wind masks your footsteps. At night, you eat what passes for dinner. stale bread, a few slices of something pretending to be cheese, and a thin soup that tastes mostly like disappointment. You'd complain, but everyone else looks too tired to care. There's a sense of strange camaraderie among your fellow trainees. You don't know their real names. No one uses them here, but you know their movements, their tempers, their ways of keeping warm when the night air turns sharp. One of them, a wiry boy with a grin too big for his face, tells you he joined because he wanted to see the world. You both laugh at that. The only world you've seen lately is the 4 streets between here and the training yard. Still, laughter feels good, even if it's brief. Your mentor occasionally shares fragments of knowledge, the kind that sound like riddles until you realize they're just his way of explaining the obvious. "A blade's no good if your hand shakes," he says one morning. "Better to run than die brave." Another day, he tells you, "Poison's a coward's weapon, but a coward who lives still wins." You suspect he's less philosopher, more survivor. One factual note about this world you've been thrown into: professional killers did exist in medieval Europe, though not in the romanticized sense. Some were soldiers for hire, some spies, and some, especially in Italian city-states, were political enforcers working for noble families. Venice, Florence, Milan, each had its whispers. Assassination wasn't an art. It was a service, paid for, executed quietly, and forgotten. You're being trained to be forgettable. One rainy afternoon, your mentor decides it's time for observation drills. He takes you to the town square, a chaos of carts, shouting merchants, and people arguing about turnips. He points to a man buying bread and says, "Tell me what he's thinking." You watch. The man's hands are fidgeting. His eyes dart to the alley every few seconds. "He's waiting for someone," you say. "Good." Your mentor nods. "Now, how fast can you get close enough to steal his purse without being noticed?" You blink. His purse, but he's already gone. Testing you as always. You edge through the crowd, pretending to admire fruit you can't afford, pretending you belong. The sound of haggling, the creak of wooden wheels, the sharp laughter of children playing nearby. It all forms a kind of living symphony. You slide closer, one heartbeat at a time, fingers brushing the rough fabric of the man's cloak. And then you sneeze, spectacularly. The man spins, startled. You freeze. He stares, frowning, then mutters something about dirty street rats and walks away. You half expect your mentor to appear behind you, disappointed. He doesn't. Instead, you hear a low chuckle from somewhere in the crowd. Later that evening, he tells you, "You failed beautifully. Better than most." That's the closest thing to praise you've ever heard from him. As weeks turn to months, you find that your senses are sharpening. You can tell what kind of metal a weapon is by its sound. You can tell if someone's lying by the way their voice catches. You even start to enjoy climbing rooftops at dusk, watching the town shrink beneath you. The air cooler up here, cleaner. For a moment, you feel free. But freedom's a strange thing in this life. You have no name, no past, no future that doesn't involve other people's secrets. One night, sitting by a flickering lantern, your mentor tells you a story. He speaks of the old man of the mountain, the legendary leader of the Hashishin, who supposedly ruled from a fortress high in Persia and commanded his followers with whispers and dreams. Some say he promised paradise to his assassins. Others say he simply paid well and kept them loyal through fear. Historians still wonder. Your mentor murmurs, if any of that was real, or if it was all just a story made up by the enemies who feared them. You ask if he believes in paradise. He shrugs. If it exists, it probably has better food. You laugh softly. The sound surprises you. As you lie down that night, you realize something's changing. You no longer think like the scared child who walked into that tavern weeks ago. You're quieter inside now, more alert, The darkness doesn't frighten you as much as it used to. Outside, the rain stops. The world smells clean for once. Somewhere nearby, a cat yowls at the moon like it knows secrets you'll never learn. You close your eyes, and in the soft hum of the night, you almost believe that this strange, dangerous path might actually lead somewhere. Almost. You wake before dawn to the sound of someone sharpening steel. It's a crisp, cold morning, the kind that smells like wet iron and burnt bread. Your breath clouds in the air as you sit up, bones protesting after another night on the straw floor. Your mentor doesn't look at you when he says, "You're ready for real work." You almost laugh. Ready? You've fallen off more rooftops than you've climbed, and you're still not entirely sure how to land without sounding like a sack of potatoes. But he's serious. He tosses you a worn cloak, a thin dagger, and a bundle of instructions written on parchment that smells faintly of vinegar. The mission is simple, he says, which is always how terrible ideas begin. You're to shadow a man who's been meeting with the wrong people at the wrong hours. Someone's worried he might be leaking information. You're not supposed to kill him, yet your mentor adds, and there's that smile again. The one that says the line between observe and eliminate is thinner than the edge of your blade. The marketplace is waking up as you slip into the streets. The cobblestones gleam with dew. Chickens are already escaping their cages, and someone is loudly swearing in a language you don't recognize. You pull the hood lower over your face and blend into the flow of bodies. The man you're following, he's not what you expected. Not a soldier or a spy, just a baker, flour dusted on his sleeves. He walks quickly, nervously, glancing over his shoulder like a man who knows what it feels like to be hunted. You tail him from a distance, ducking behind stalls, pretending to admire apples you can't afford. Hours pass. He never meets anyone, never strays far from the main street, just buys a sack of grain and heads home. By the time he vanishes into a narrow alley, you're soaked in sweat and frustration. Either your information's wrong or he's a very cautious baker. You trudge back to the safe house, feeling foolish. Your mentor doesn't scold you. He doesn't even look disappointed. Sometimes, he says, the waiting's the job. You wonder how many assassins in history spent their days sitting in dark corners, watching absolutely nothing happen. Probably most of them. The next week is a blur of waiting, listening, pretending to be invisible. You discover that half of being an assassin involves being extremely bored but very alert about it. You watch a nobleman's carriage for 3 days straight only to learn that his mysterious companion is just a man delivering cheese. You nearly fall asleep in a church pew while spying on a confession. You realize you've spent more time eavesdropping on gossip than doing anything lethal. A historical truth, much of medieval espionage, and by extension assassination, was tied to politics, not personal vendettas. The line between assassin and spy was blurry. Messengers carried coded letters. Courtiers whispered about rival families. Sometimes, just knowing too much could get you killed faster than any blade. Still, there are moments when the danger feels very real. One night, you're following a contact through the lower quarter, a part of town where even rats look nervous. You keep your distance, stepping lightly over puddles that smell like despair and dead fish. Then you hear it, the crunch of footsteps behind you. Someone's following the follower. You don't think. You duck into a side alley, press yourself against the cold stone, and wait. The shadow passes, close enough that you can smell sweat and iron. Whoever it is, they're good, too good. You hold your breath until your lungs ache. When you finally exhale, the air trembles. You survive the night, but your heart doesn't slow for hours. Later, your mentor tells you it's part of the lesson. If you're good, he says, someone will always want to find out how good. You ask him what happens when they do. He grins. Then you find out too. One lesser-known detail about assassins during this period, especially in the Mediterranean, is that many were multilingual. They had to be. Orders were traded across cultures, between Arabic, Latin, and Greek-speaking worlds. The ability to blend into any crowd wasn't just about clothing. It was about language, posture, even accent. You've started practicing that yourself. Copying how merchants shout, how guards grumble, how drunkards slur, is oddly satisfying. Still, the glamour wears thin fast. Every mission feels like a test of patience rather than skill. You sleep where you can, under carts in half-collapsed barns. You eat whatever doesn't smell actively poisonous. You dream of soft beds and the taste of warm bread. Sometimes you catch yourself staring at normal people, blacksmiths, washerwomen, shepherds, and feeling something dangerously close to envy. Their lives are simple, honest. No secrets, no daggers hidden under cloaks. Just work, food, rest. You could almost forget the world's cruelty for a moment watching them. But then your mentor's voice echoes in your head. Someone has to. You don't know if that's conviction or curse anymore. On your 5th assignment, another observation job. You're posted outside a tavern, rain dripping from your hood, waiting for a merchant who's supposedly meeting an enemy agent. Hours pass. The torches burn low. A drunk staggers out singing about a cow. Your stomach growls in rhythm with the song. Then, finally, movement. 2 men step out, cloaked and hurried. You follow, keeping your distance. One of them glances back just once, but long enough for your pulse to spike. You duck behind a cart, slip through puddles, edge closer. You hear snatches of conversation. The contract, next week. The Duke must not know. And then you hear your name. It's faint, nearly lost beneath the rain, but unmistakable. You freeze. They're talking about you. You, the watcher, the expendable one. Your first instinct is to run. Your second is to listen harder. The first wins. You vanish down an alley, breath ragged, heart trying to hammer its way out of your chest. When you finally reach the safe house, your mentor's already waiting. He doesn't ask what happened, just looks at you for a long moment and says, "Now you understand." You do. You're not a hero in this world. You're a tool. Disposable. Replaceable. It's a sobering truth. The kind that sticks in your chest like cold metal. Historians still debate whether real assassins of the medieval period believed in higher ideals, religious zeal, loyalty to a cause, or if they were just pawns used and discarded by those with power. You sit there in the flickering light, drenched and shaking, realizing the question isn't ancient at all. It's personal. Outside, thunder rolls across the rooftops. You close your eyes, the sound swallowing your thoughts. Somewhere, far away, a church bell rings for midnight, marking another day you've survived in a world built to erase you. You pull your cloak tighter, whispering to no one, "Not yet," because surviving quietly, stubbornly, is the only rebellion you have left. The road out of town is little more than a muddy scar across the countryside, lined with sagging willows, and the occasional will rut deep enough to drown in. You trudge along it with your pack slung over one shoulder and the distinct feeling that this assignment isn't going to end with applause. Your mentor told you to meet a courier 2 days ride west. Something about intercepting a message, delicate work, political implications, and other words that mean, "You'll probably hate this." You set off before sunrise, when the mist still clings to the fields and the world feels half asleep. The cold nips at your fingers. Somewhere behind you, a rooster shouts encouragement or maybe insult. It's hard to tell with roosters. Travel, you've decided, is highly overrated. You'd imagined scenic landscapes, the romance of the open road. What you get instead is blisters, damp socks, and the constant suspicion that every bush hides either a bandit or a goat with poor boundaries. By noon, You reach a crossroads marked by a wooden post leaning like it's given up on its purpose. A cart rumbles by, pulled by an ox moving at the speed of deep contemplation. You ask the driver if he's seen a man in a red cloak carrying a sealed letter. He squints at you, spits and says, "Seen a lot of red things. Some of them dead." You decide that's as close to helpful as anyone gets in this century. You camp that night in the lee of a ruined chapel. The air smells of wet stone and moss, and your fire sputters like it's judging your wood-gathering skills. You eat a crust of bread so hard it could double as a weapon. It's quiet here, too quiet, and for the first time you realize how much you've grown used to noise. The clamor of markets, the shouts of guards, even the snores of fellow trainees. Out here, the silence feels heavy. You find yourself listening for footsteps that never come. Morning brings fog thick enough to chew. You follow the path west, passing through villages that look identical in their poverty. Lean-to huts, crooked fences, and chickens that stare at you like you owe them money. In one of these villages, you find your courier, or rather, what's left of him. He's slumped beside a well, face pale, tunic torn, and his satchel missing. A trail of footprints leads into the forest. You crouch, fingers brushing the dirt. Whoever did this wasn't subtle. You can almost picture it. A struggle, a shout, the quick end of someone else's story. Your orders were to intercept a message, but no one said what to do if it was already intercepted. You sigh. The forest looms ahead, dark and humming with unseen life. You head in anyway because that's what you do now. Walk toward bad ideas with professional resignation. The forest is dense, full of dripping leaves and the smell of decay. You move quietly, stepping between roots, following faint traces, broken twigs, disturbed moss, the occasional boot print. Eventually, you spot movement ahead. Two men crouched beside a log, examining a sealed letter. You recognize the wax mark from your orders. You should turn back. You don't. You step closer, careful as a cat. One of the men looks up suddenly, eyes narrowing. You freeze, heart thudding. Then you see his weapon, a curved dagger, foreign-made. Not local thieves, then something else. A historical note drifts through your mind. During the 12th and 13th centuries, Europe's political scene was a tangled mess of alliances and betrayals. Nobles sent assassins and spies to handle their disagreements. Sometimes those assassins met each other in the field, two shadows colliding in the dark, each hired to erase the other. You realize uneasily that you might be living that exact story. Before you can move, the taller man calls out, "Come out, friend. We've been expecting you." You curse under your breath and step from behind the tree. The men smile in the way predators do before they stop pretending. The taller one holds up the letter. "Funny thing," he says, "this message mentions someone who looks a lot like you." You try to sound calm. "Then I suppose I should read it." "Afraid not." He tucks it into his cloak. Orders are orders. The fight that follows is fast, messy, and terrifying. You don't remember drawing your dagger, only the sound of breathing yours. There's the sharp thud of boots on mud. It's over in seconds. One man's gone. The other crawls away, clutching his side. You retrieve the letter, your hands shaking. You open it. The parchment inside is smudged, but the words are clear enough. Eliminate the courier and retrieve the message. Deliver it to the monastery at Montrevel. Signed, L. You stare at it for a long time. So that's what delicate work means. You weren't intercepting the message, you were the cleanup crew. By the time you reach Montrevel, you're exhausted. The monastery sits on a hill, its stone walls glowing gold in the late sun. Bells toll, echoing down the valley. A monk greets you at the gate, eyes kind but too knowing. You hand him the letter, and he slips it into his sleeve like it's just another confession. God forgives those who don't know what they do, he says softly. Then, after a pause, but I think you do. That night, you sleep in the monastery's guest room, surrounded by silence that feels heavier than any weapon. You dream of the forest, of mud and movement and the way your heart refused to stop racing. In the morning, your mentor is waiting in the courtyard, as if he's been here all along. Good work, he says simply. You want to shout at him to ask what any of this means, but you don't. You just nod, because that's what assassins do. They nod and they keep moving. As you ride away from Montrevel, the sun rises behind you, washing the hills in light that feels almost holy. For a moment, you think of the baker, the courier, the men in the woods, and you wonder if any of them will ever be remembered. Historians still argue whether assassins changed history or merely cleaned up its messes. Looking out over the misty fields, you suspect it's the latter. The road ahead winds toward another nameless town. You shift in your saddle, feeling the weight of the dagger at your side. Somewhere, deep inside, you whisper that same promise to yourself again. Not yet. Not done. Not finished. Not free. Just moving. By now, the romance of the trade is long gone. You've stopped pretending to be mysterious or noble. You're just tired, perpetually damp, and more intimately familiar with the smell of iron than anyone should ever be. You've been doing this long enough to know that half the job is just keeping your tools from falling apart. Tools that, frankly, weren't that great to begin with. This morning, you're crouched beside a river, trying to clean your dagger without losing it to the current. The water's freezing, clear enough to show your reflection, drawn, hollow-eyed, someone who looks more like a rumor than a person. You rub at a stain that won't come off and wonder what medieval steel was tempered with. Disappointment, probably. Your arsenal consists of 3 knives, each of which seems to have its own personality. One's too dull, one's too short, and the last one just wants to bend at the worst possible moment. You also carry a small pouch of powder that's supposed to blind people but mostly just makes them sneeze, and a rope that looks like it's one frayed fiber away from betraying you. You once heard that the legendary assassins of the East used hidden blades, elaborate poisons, even smoke bombs. You have a spoon that doubles as a lockpick. Maintenance days are the worst. You spend hours sharpening, oiling, checking edges against your thumb, trying to convince your dagger not to rust out of sheer boredom. Tools of the trade, they said, but no one mentioned you'd need the patience of a blacksmith and the optimism of a priest. And then there's the cloak. Once it might have been impressive, dark, sweeping, mysterious. Now it's just heavy, itchy, and permanently damp, no matter what the weather does. It smells like rain and failure. Every time you put it on, you think about how it clings to your back when you run, turning stealth into an exercise in self-loathing. Still, these are your companions. You've learned their quirks, how to make them work despite their flaws. You even start to see a kind of grim humor in it all. When your knife slips during sharpening and cuts your thumb, you mutter, "Fair enough." When your cloak snags on a nail, you sigh, "Of course it did." It's almost comforting, this predictability of dysfunction. You're stationed this week in a small coastal town, the kind that smells perpetually of salt and seaweed. Your latest assignment involves a local noble who's gotten too friendly with the wrong merchants. The goal: send a message. The phrase has begun to haunt you. It never means what it sounds like. You spend 2 days observing the man's routines. He's plump, anxious, and constantly chewing something. You suspect he'd confess to anything if someone just offered him a warm bath. When the time comes, you slip into his courtyard after dusk, tools ready. The plan is to leave a mark on his gate, a symbol that says, "We're watching." Simple, quick, no blood, except your chisel breaks. You stare at the snapped metal, sighing into the night. You consider using your knife, but it's too dull. You end up scratching the warning into the wood with the broken chisel anyway. each stroke sounding far louder than it should. It's not elegant, but it'll do. That's the motto of your profession, really, it'll do, probably. The next morning, the town buzzes with gossip. Some say it was a warning from bandits. Others think it's a blessing symbol. The noble panics, of course, hiring more guards and locking his doors. You watch all this from a distance, eating stale bread and feeling vaguely ridiculous. Master of shadows. You mutter to yourself, terror of splintered wood. A factual detail about this era. Real assassins, especially those in service to noble houses, often used symbols or coded markings to send threats or confirm kills. A carved emblem on a door, a feather left on a pillow, a coin placed in a fountain. Each mark meant something to those who knew how to read it. You suppose you're part of that same cryptic tradition now, though your art form currently looks like bad graffiti. Later that day, you visit the town's alchemist. That's a generous term. The man's more like a local enthusiast of strange smells. His workspace reeks of vinegar and burnt cabbage. He proudly shows you a new poison, which turns out to be moldy wine. Powerful stuff, he insists. You nod politely and buy a small vial anyway, mostly out of pity. Historians still argue about what poisons assassins actually used. Some mention hemlock or belladonna. Others point to concoctions made from arsenic or crushed gemstones. You think most of it's exaggerated. Based on experience, medieval poisoners were probably just enthusiastic cooks with bad instincts. You try the vial later on a rat, not a person. The rat sniffs it, sneezes, and wanders off looking offended. You decide not to use it in the field. Evenings, you retreat to your rented room above a tanner's shop. The air is thick with the smell of leather and lye. You polish your tools by candlelight, watching the flicker of flame slide along the blade's imperfect edge. It's a strange kind of intimacy, this quiet maintenance of things designed to end lives. You find yourself wondering how many other assassins through history sat like this, alone, caring for their tools as if they were the only constant in a world that never remembered their names. A lesser-known fact floats to mind. In some cases, assassins were buried with their blades, not as honor, but as containment. People feared their weapons might still remember violence. You stare at your knife a little too long after that. It reflects the candlelight like a half-closed eye. The job takes a toll in other ways, too. Your hands never feel clean anymore. Your hearing's sharper, your trust thinner. You flinch at sudden noises, and you've started keeping your back to the wall even when you sleep. Yet, somewhere between the clumsy poisons and the broken daggers, you find a kind of routine. It's bleak, yes, but steady. The world keeps spinning, and you keep patching up your cloak, sharpening your blade, replacing the rope that betrayed you. There's comfort in the repetition, a rhythm that drowns out the larger questions: why you do this, who it serves, how long before you stop being a person and become a whisper. Outside, waves crash against the cliffs, a sound like breathing, deep, endless, indifferent. You set your tools aside, stretch your aching hands, and whisper to yourself, tomorrow, it'll all work better. You don't believe it, but you say it anyway, because in your line of work, pretending things are fine is its own kind of weapon. By the time word of your reputation reaches back to you, it's almost unrecognizable. In one version, you scaled the walls of a fortress to strike down a baron in his sleep. In another, you swam across a moat filled with serpents of all things, to silence a treacherous priest. One tavern ballad even insists you're not a person at all, but a restless ghost who kills with a whisper. You listen to these tales from the corner of an inn, nursing a mug of something vaguely beer-shaped, and think, wow, I wish I'd been there for that. In truth, you've spent most of your career running away, hiding, and pretending to be a traveling scribe whenever someone looks suspiciously long at your face. Still, the stories grow, as stories tend to do, and soon you are no longer a scruffy, underpaid killer for hire, you're a legend. or at least the kind of legend that gives innkeepers an excuse to charge extra for gossip. You might laugh if it weren't so eerie. It starts with whispers. Locals eye you differently. People move out of your way in the market. One boy even asks if you can teach him the art of death. You tell him to learn carpentry instead. It's safer, and the pay's probably better. Your mentor reappears one evening, as he always does, without warning. You're sitting on a low stone wall, sharpening a dagger that will never stay sharp. He leans beside you, his cloak still smelling faintly of rain and arrogance. "Your name's spreading," he says. "Dangerous thing, fame." You shrug. "It's not my name they're using." "Exactly." He glances at you, and there's a flicker of something like pride or maybe concern. Legends are useful, until they aren't. It's not the first time he's spoken in riddles, but this one lingers. The next few weeks you see how right he is. Word of you precedes you wherever you go. Some people offer favors, others warnings. You start to feel like you're being chased by your own reflection, a myth that grows bolder every time you fail to catch it. History, you realize, isn't written by the brave or the clever. It's written by survivors and sometimes by liars. There's an irony to it, really. You've spent your life being unseen, unnoticed. Now you can't disappear. Every shadow seems to whisper a name that isn't quite yours. You start using aliases so often that you forget which ones you've used where. One town knows you as a traveling healer, another as a wandering poet, another as that strange, quiet person who eats bread like it's suspicious. A factual note for your sleepless brain. During the late medieval period, assassins, or people accused of being assassins, were often fictionalized into symbols of fear or justice. Chroniclers, especially in Italy and France, exaggerated their exploits to make political points. Some scholars even argue that entire assassin orders were invented to justify certain rulers' paranoia. You suspect that's still happening, except now you're the convenient fiction. Still, you play along. You fake the swagger, drop a few cryptic lines, and watch people back away in awe. It's oddly satisfying, if a little lonely. Then one night, the fiction bites back. You're staying in a tavern near Lyon, half asleep when someone slips into your room. You wake to the whisper of steel. The assassin, another one younger, lunges. You parry out of instinct, your blades ringing in the dark. It's a clumsy, close fight, all elbows and panic. When it's over, your breath fogs the air, and the boy's dagger lies in the corner. He's still breathing, barely. You light a candle and look at him. Mud-streaked face, trembling hands, eyes that haven't seen enough of the world yet. You realize he looks exactly like you did when this all began. "Who sent you?" you ask. He hesitates, then whispers, "You did." You blink. "What?" "They said it was you, the ghost killer, the nameless one. Said you'd betrayed the Brotherhood. Said you wanted me gone." The weight of that settles in your chest like a stone. You glance at his weapon, standard issue for your order. Which means, of course, your mentor had planned this. Or maybe not your mentor, but someone above him. Someone who needed to erase a name that had grown too loud. Historians still debate whether secret societies of assassins ever turned on their own, or whether those tales were just propaganda. But sitting there, candle flickering, you think the truth is simpler. When secrets are currency, even loyalty can't be trusted to hold its value. You patch the boy's wound as best you can. He watches you with disbelief, maybe shame. You tell him to disappear, to start over. "Don't go back," you warn. "They'll finish the job." He nods, pale and silent, and vanishes into the night. The next morning, you're already gone too. You take back roads, avoiding cities, avoiding eyes. Everywhere you go, you hear new versions of yourself. Some saying you died heroically, others that you vanished into the mountains or joined a monastery. or were executed by the Pope himself. You're all of them now, and none of them. A lesser-known detail. Historians sometimes find entire records of assassins whose names and deeds contradict each other so completely that it's impossible to know if they were one person or 10. It makes you wonder how many of those contradictions were people like you, running from their own myths. The road becomes your only home. You pass through forests that whisper like oceans, over mountains that gleam with frost. You start talking to your horse, who's a better listener than most humans you've met. Occasionally, you laugh at the absurdity of it all. How a few bad rumors turned you into a bedtime story told to frighten squires. You begin to see the strange mercy in anonymity. If no one knows who you are, no one can kill you twice. The nights stretch longer. You make campfires small and brief, sleeping with one eye open. The air grows colder, the stars brighter. Sometimes, as you drift toward uneasy sleep, you imagine all the other nameless figures across centuries. The spies, the thieves, the quiet hands who did history's dirtiest work, and you feel a kinship that's half comfort, half curse. One night, as you watch the flames dance low, you whisper to the darkness, "If they ever write me down, I hope they spell my name wrong, because being forgotten is safer than being remembered." And in this strange twilight between truth and legend, you realize you've become exactly what the world wanted. A story no one can quite prove, but everyone loves to tell. You reach the end of the road, or at least the part of it that still remembers you. The last town you passed through barely looked up as you went by, and that suited you just fine. There's something beautiful about anonymity after years of pretending to be a shadow with a name. Now the world feels quieter. Maybe it's just your ears adjusting to the silence after so long listening for footsteps. Or maybe it's because you've finally drifted far enough from the noise of kings, guilds, and whispered contracts. You camp tonight at the edge of a forest where the air tastes like pine and frost, and the stars hang above like coins you'll never spend. You're not an assassin anymore. Not officially. Not practically either. You haven't taken a contract in months. You've been living off what little silver you have left, mending tools you no longer use, and sleeping better than you have any right to. The knives still travel with you, of course. Old habits die harder than emperors. You're older now. Your knees pop when you crouch. Your cloak's been repaired so many times it's basically a quilt of your own mistakes. The thought makes you smile, an honest, quiet one. Still, sometimes at night, your hands move on their own, checking the edge of your dagger or tracing the faded emblem stitched into your belt. It's not nostalgia exactly. It's more like muscle memory trying to remind you that you used to matter in a way. But what was it all for? That question lingers like smoke. Not in a despairing way, more like curiosity. An itch that can't be scratched because history doesn't leave mirrors for people like you. You start to wonder what happened to the boy you spared, the one who thought you were the ghost killer. Maybe he's somewhere far from here, still breathing, still free. Maybe he's telling stories about the nameless assassin who vanished into legend. Maybe, in a way, that's enough. Historians still debate whether assassins like you ever found peace, or if the work simply burned too much humanity out of them to allow for rest. Some think they retired as hermits or monks. Others believe they were hunted down before they could fade away. You like to think a few just kept walking, into the woods, into obscurity, into something quieter. The fire crackles softly beside you, a low, steady heartbeat in the dark. You tear a piece of bread, chew slowly, and watch your breath curl into the cold air. There's comfort in the simplicity of it. No codes, no orders, no waiting for someone else's fate to become your problem. Just night, warmth, and the distant call of an owl that sounds suspiciously like it's complaining. A factual detail surfaces in your mind, uninvited. The last recorded medieval assassins were actually caught not for their kills, but for their loneliness. Letters written to no one, confessions never meant to be found. One was discovered keeping a list of the people he didn't kill. His way, perhaps, of proving he still had a choice. You understand that. Choice. It's the one thing that was always slippery in this life. You were told when to move, who to silence, how to vanish. The illusion of control kept you alive, but it never belonged to you. Until now. Now you decide when to light the fire, when to sleep, when to let the dagger rest at your side instead of in your hand. It's strange how freedom feels less like triumph and more like exhaling after holding your breath for years. You lie back on the cold ground, cloak pulled around you. The stars shimmer through the branches, patient and ancient. You think about how small you must look from up there. One speck among millions, once a blade in the dark, now just a body finding its way back to stillness. A breeze stirs, the forest sighs. Somewhere, an old wooden sign creaks, the letters too faded to read. You close your eyes, half smiling, because you already know what it says. It doesn't matter where the road leads anymore. You've stopped chasing ghosts, your own most of all. The fire dwindles to embers. You roll to your side, listening to the steady rhythm of your heartbeat, and for the first time you realize it's not racing. It's calm, unhurried, almost content. You remember your mentor's words, the first lesson he ever gave you. You must move like a shadow. You used to think it meant being unseen. Now you understand it meant learning to fade. And fading, you decide, isn't such a terrible thing. Because fading isn't the same as vanishing. Sometimes it's just another word for peace. And now, as the last coals of your campfire dim, you feel the quiet stretching outward, soft, endless, safe. The air cools against your skin, a slow exhale from the world itself. You let it wash over you, the chill, gentle, grounding. You breathe in deeply, and the scent of pine and ash fills your chest. There's no more need to run, no orders waiting, no footsteps behind you, only the soft hum of the night, the rhythm of your pulse, and the whisper of leaves shifting far above. Let your shoulders loosen, let your jaw unclench, let every part of you that's been braced for danger finally rest. In your mind, the forest fades into something even quieter, a great silver fog rolling across fields that glimmer faintly in moonlight. You walk through it without hurry. Each step feels slower, softer, lighter. The weight of blades and shadows slips away until you're carrying nothing at all. You hear water somewhere ahead, calm and even, lapping gently at the shore of a still lake. You reach it, kneel, and touch the surface. The reflection that looks back at you is almost unrecognizable, calm, peaceful, finally whole. The world narrows to that sound. The slow pulse of the lake, the hush of wind across its surface, and your own steady breathing, blending with it until you can't tell one from the other. You let go of names, of stories, of everything but this moment of quiet. The stars overhead blur softly into one vast, glowing haze, and for the first time in a long time, you sleep, not as a shadow, not as a legend, but as yourself.